What is up, nerd friends? Welcome back to the Nerd Bench. I hope you had a happy hobby days and a very merry nerd year. I bet you a lot of folks got some fresh RC for Christmas. Maybe you're just getting into RC because of your Christmas presents. So I figured it was a fine time to talk about a bunch of stuff that we all need to know about our RC cars and beyond. And I want to touch on things about basic RC, kind of some advanced RC stuff once you get into it a bit more, and some of the features of the Hobbywing lineup as well. The one thing that I run into very frequently is confusion about receivers. Folks give me a call, they have problems. They actually try to bind a different brand receiver to a different radio brand, and that doesn't work. If you didn't know that, the receivers have to match the brand. But the big one that I run into all the time is the channel assignments. This week, I had several folks call me up with confusion on where the wires go. The speed control wire, the little wire that goes from your speed control into your receiver, is for your throttle channel, which is always, no matter what, channel number 2 on the receiver. Now, there's no way to really easily reassign the channels on your radio, but some of the radios do allow some mixing and stuff like that. But for the most part, if you haven't messed with your radio, no matter what, steering is number 1, throttle is number 2. That's just the way that it is. The one that I run into often, tons of people buy Traxxas rigs and they do upgrades because they want to or they need to. There are actually 2 channel number 1s on here. That's not going to focus, but trust me, there are 2 channel number 1s on a lot, most of, if not all of, the Traxxas receivers. And they usually plug their servo into the bottom channel number 1, and then people, without thinking, they go, oh, the next one must be number 2. But it's actually another number 1, and you'll turn your wheels and it makes the throttle go. Yeah, I know. What's that all about? Traxxas vehicles, there's a bunch of them that have dual servos, so this is their way around not needing a harness and generally creating a need for guys like me to have a job so that you have a place to call and have someone tell you about that. But I talk to folks about that, I don't want to say once a month, but it might be more than once a month, about that double channel number 1. So if you're a Traxxas user, keep that in mind. There are other channels in these receivers that do other things. Auxiliaries, there's channel 3, channel 4, all that other stuff. I don't want to tell you to read your manual, but read your manual and your radio. That'll tell you how to do those things. But for the most part, today's computerized radios, that's pretty straightforward. Or a lot of the RTR radios even come with a 3-channel receiver or 3-channel radio that has a toggle switch on. I know my Element did, and my Axial RTRs all had a third auxiliary channel that had a 3-position switch, which is very cool, I thought, for options. Stuff like the new WP1080 G2 that has the auxiliary channel inputs, you'll be able to do drag brake on the fly or change the real drive mode, which is pretty neat. Next up, I want to talk about programmers. Folks get new speed controls and they want to tune the speed control. Before you get into tuning the speed control, make sure that you calibrate it. That's the big thing that causes a ton of problems. If you don't calibrate the speed control before you try to tune it, it oftentimes will lock out the tuning, give you problems, then you got to call me, send me an email, whatever the case may be, which I don't mind, but this maybe save you some time. It could be late at night, you're watching videos on the YouTubes like I do to try to figure out what's wrong with your stuff. In the car lineup, the Xerun series does not work with the LED card that has the red numbers and whatever color stickers they come with that sit like this. It says program card on the top of all of these. These boxes are all the same except for the sticker that's on them. So if you have a speed control that works with one of these boxes, the program card, it'll work with all of the program cards. The difference is the sticker will not match what your speed control settings are. So you get your instruction manual for the speed control out. There's a chart in there that tells you what all the numbers mean. You can use that. So if you have like a QuicRun series, an Ezrun series, a Xerun series, any of the program cards, the LED, Larry, Edward, David, or light emitting diode, because these are LED numbers, these will work with those. You just have to use your instruction manual as a reference. I almost tell everybody just ignore these stickers and use your instruction manual every time. But on the XRun series, the racing stuff, or the Platinum series, the high-end helicopter stuff, you're going to need the LCD programming box, and the one with the blue letters and the USB-C port on the end, which is the round one on both, the one that you can plug in both directions. That guy is the G2 version of the LCD multi-function program box, or multi-function LCD program box is what it says on the top. It actually has a little itty-bitty tiny G2 right there that you can't really see. But this guy has the blue screen, the blue letters. This works on the Xerun. It also works on the Max series as well as the Platinum series. And you can do updates to this guy, but you have to have a Windows PC as well as the USB link from the Hobbywing website. The other option that you have is an OTA device, which I don't have here. It's that little wireless module that plugs into the speed control, or you can do programming with a tunalizer as well. This has a Bluetooth built into it, and it works with the HW-Link V2 app. Now, the OTA or the Bluetooth stuff is just like the LCD box as far as compatibility goes. It's only going to work with the Xeruns, the Platinums, and the Max series. And in addition to that, the OTA for a lot of the Xerun series speed controls enhances the data logging capabilities. Some of the speed controls have built-in data logging that shows you maximum temperatures, minimum voltages, current draws, maximum RPMs, a bunch of fun stuff like that. The OTA installed in the vehicle while you drive around lets you record the whole run, gives you graphs, fun stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of having the OTA installed, only because it's like having a $50 bill strapped in your vehicle driving around if something goes wrong. But for folks that really want to nerd out, that is an option. So we talked about some Hobbywing stuff there, but another like friendly tip that I have for anybody who has these battery packs with the bullet plugs on them: if you're not pro racing, make yourself pigtails. Leave these guys installed forever and only charge through this guy and operate your vehicle through this guy. The reason being, if this plug wears out, or from all the plugging in and out that you're going to do, you can just unsolder this or cut the wires and solder a new one of these on. What you cannot do is replace the bullets inside of your battery pack. And if you're unplugging and plugging in, unplugging and plugging in through the life of the battery, those things get a lot of wear and tear. They turn different colors and they create all sorts of problems. So me and all my buddies, because we're not serious pro racer types, we just leave these pigtails on our batteries all of the time, and we try to never move these around if we can't, or if we can help it. You're asking, Charlie, what do you do about balance charging? Well, you take the balance charge, or you take your lead that you normally have that has the little funny guy that plugs into the balance port, and you just put a plug where the bullets are. So you do the opposite end of this, and then you make that plugs in there, and the little guy plugs into there. Easy peasy. And on that note, I will say this. If you're using an adapter on your battery pack, if you're using like Dean's plugs or Traxxas plugs, you're losing performance. We've run into so many folks that I do RC with that they have Dean's plugs, and I travel around now with a box of XT60s and XT90s to prove my point, is that I'll install these for them, and then they go out and run it, and it's like night and day difference how much better it runs and how much longer it lasts. Now, this isn't because those plugs are necessarily bad. It's because they're worn out, and they are kind of bad. I guess it is kind of because they're bad. They're not big enough for the surface. You want see how big the wire is? Your plug should be at least as big as your wire, if not bigger for the most part. And that's why I'm a big fan of the XT90s, because they're quite a bit larger than XT60s are. But the big thing that we run into is adapters and weak plugs cause shutdowns, glitching, heating problems. Just basic, not as much fun as you should be having with your RC car. So do yourself some favor, get the genuine AMAS. See if you can see that on there. They say AMAS right on them. You can get these off Amazon. Hobby shops stock them now. I know A-Main has them. They come pre-installed on most of our lineup, so it's a good way to go. But if you have to run an adapter, you're doing yourself even more discredit to your performance program. You want to make sure that any adapters or converters or whatever you want to call them are not used. Now, some of you are angrily typing, well, this is basically an adapter. You're right, it is, but these are very high quality plugs on each end. It's not going from a small plug to another small plug or two small plugs. This is minimum to the same size, if not bigger type of deal. And I solder very well, so my solder joints are pretty good. We'll talk about soldering here in just a second, but adapters and weak plugs are another reason that I have a job. So, I mean, I'm not mad that they're out there. It's why people send me emails or call me and tell me that they're having problems, and then I get to tell them, well, change your plugs and it'll be fixed. And I mean, if you guys have ever called the tech lines, you've talked to me, and it's one of my big things I try to tell people about is plug swaps. Another one that I run into all the time is I got a sensored motor and a sensorless ESC. Are those going to work together? And for the most part, yes. A sensorless speed control can operate a sensored motor. You just don't plug in the sensor wire, obviously. The only time that runs into a problem is if you have the 2-pole or the turn-based motors. If it's rated by kV, it's probably a 4-pole motor. If it's rated by turns, it's a 2-pole motor. The turn-based motors are more suited for sensored operation because they're not as torquey as a 4-pole motor is. It's to do with the size and a bunch of other things. But sensorless doesn't do startups very well. It doesn't do low speed very well. Or a 4-pole motor helps compensate for the lack of startup that a sensorless has. And in the Hobbywing lineup, most, if not all, of the sensor-based speed controls have a hybrid mode or a sensorless mode. Well, they'll run with the sensor wire unplugged, or they'll run a sensorless motor. And it's not a great experience. Sensorless is not nearly as awesome as sensored is, so I mean, it's gonna be okay, but not awesome. All right, one thing that's near and dear to my heart, and again, another reason that I have a job, so I'm just trying to help you guys out with the stuff that I talk about on a daily basis around here, either on the phones, on emails, whatever the case may be, is soldering stuff. And if your solder joint looks bad, it is bad. But if your solder joint looks good, it might still be bad. The wire itself should not float in the solder. You want the wire to be on the connector. A wise man once told me that solder is a terrible conductor, and it's basically just there to hold the wires together or hold the wire onto the connector itself. So the idea is a thin layer of solder, you put them together, and that solder all joins and holds itself together. But what we run into is a bubble of solder, and then you tin your wire and it's got solder all over it, and then you touch the two together and your wire isn't actually getting anywhere close to the surface of the connector. It's just floating above it. And what that does is it creates resistance. Solder is made out of lead and tin. Sometimes it's made out of, these days, there's no lead in it. It's high silver, but it's still not nearly as good as a proper mechanical connection would be. So it's important to make sure that when you are soldering that you apply some pressure to the wire and get it to go through the solder down to the surface of the connector before you take the pressure away. Well, there you have it, folks. Some helpful, I hope, helpful tips for getting your RC cars running better, or making sure that you're having a good time with your RC and you're not running into some of the basic compatibility issues. Like I said, these are topics that I talk to people about on the phone, I email them with on a regular basis, so hopefully this helps some of you out. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please shoot us an email, NorthAmerica@hobbywing.com. You may have noticed I don't answer the comments. I have an allergy to the internet, and sometimes internet posting and all that wears me out, but you can always email us. You get a hold of myself or someone smarter than me through NorthAmerica@hobbywing.com. If you make a comment down below and you want to tell us stuff, that's great. We love and read all the comments, but a lot of times I do not have the ability to answer those questions directly, so shoot us an email. We also have a podcast. It is called RC Stuff, powered by Hobbywing. You can find it on your favorite podcast service. Just search for RC Stuff, powered by Hobbywing. We do a giveaway each and every episode. We do a new episode the first and third Friday of the month, and we give away a Hobbywing system every episode. To find out how to win, just listen to an episode. And as always, folks, thanks for tuning in. Another episode of The Charlie Show, new every Tuesday right here on the Hobbywing official YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.